An estimated 90,000 people are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease each and every year.
Up to 10 million people live with it worldwide. This degenerative disorder causes tremors, limb stiffness, balance problems, and more. Nobody knows the cause, but Marty Salt explains how new studies suggest it may begin in the gut.
My grandmother on my mother's side lived to be 102. She never had it. My aunts on my dad's side lived to be in their late 80s. They didn't have it.
Nobody in Gregory Monroe Jr.'s family had Parkinson's. In fact, for most of his life, he didn't even know what it was. But at age 40, Gregory was at work when he noticed his hands shaking.
I was working for overnight security, and I was telling the guest that his music was too loud, and my hands started to tremor.
Nobody knows what causes it, but Duke University gastroenterologist Roger Little is looking into how the gut-brain connection may play a role.
It's recently been discovered that there are specific cells in the lining of the gut that connect to the vagus nerve and send signals to the brain.
Now, Little's team is taking it a step further, looking specifically at enteroendocrine cells found in the gut.
Our laboratory discovered that these enteroendocrine cells contain a protein that's involved in Parkinson's disease.
When the protein malfunctions, it clumps together and spreads from cell to cell. These clumps are called Lewy bodies and a major sign of Parkinson's disease.
It surprised me that this happens very quickly in mice.
Little hopes what they're learning will help to stop Parkinson's before tremors or other symptoms begin. Marty Salt, WGEM News.
Now, studies are underway across the country to intercept the gut-brain connection in hopes of preventing Parkinson's. And once that connection is disrupted, doctors believe they may be able to stop several other diseases of the brain.